Hey Singapore, welcome to episode 8 of SG Sports Uncut. I'm Raj Kumar, and Uncut is a show that brings you closer to our Team Singapore athletes and coaches. On today's show, we're going to review Team Singapore's performance at the recent SEA Games in the Philippines. Joining us on the show today is the Chief of the Singapore Sports Institute in Mr. Toh Boon Yi, and he's joined by Mr. Richard Gordon, who's the Head of High Performance and Athlete Life at SSI. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of SG Sports Uncut. Toh Boon Yi, as the Chief of the Singapore Sports Institute, perhaps you could start with a brief description of the role which SSI plays in the local sporting landscape. Boon Yi.
Well, SSI's key role is to work with all our stakeholders, athletes, coaches, NSAs, to enable the sport ecosystem. And our work can be classified into three broad areas. First of all, we have a team of scientists, sports scientists and medical staff who work closely with the coaches and athletes mainly to help to level up their performance and their preparation, of course. We also have a team that looks after coach development through the National Registry of Coaches. And these are all sport coaches in Singapore, from school coaches to all the way to high performance coaches. After all, the coaches are the key force multiplier. And then the third area will be we work with the NSAs mainly to chart their plans, support them to help to deliver the outcome for the country.
Okay. And from your point of view, you were there for the whole 2.5 weeks. On the whole, how would you say Team Singapore performed at the recent SEA Games in the Philippines?
I think it's a very credible performance. And given that there were 530 events in SEA Games 2019, and actually it's very common for many laymen, I'll say, to compare from event to event or from edition to edition. But actually every SEA Games is different. We almost go into every SEA Games very differently. And if you look at the numbers, out of the 530 events in SEA Games 2019, only half were featured in 2017.
Wow.
Yes, so that's that tells you how different it is. And when we look at our performance in Singapore, obviously we look at how our athletes do in events that are featured regularly in SEA Games. So there are some sports that are featured traditionally in every SEA Games.
Sure.
We also look at sports and events that are featured at higher level games, so Asian Games, Olympic Games. And if you look at our overall performance, I think we're very happy with what we have achieved.
Okay. Let's turn now to Richard Gordon, who's the Head of High Performance and Athlete Life at the Singapore Sports Institute. Now, Richard, for the benefit of those watching, perhaps you could define the key characteristics of your role at SSI.
Okay. I work in high performance planning.
Yes.
And what that means is we look at the plans of the National Sports Associations. We also run some funding programs, so resource allocation is important. We work through sports performance managers, our staff, with the National Sports Association. So we try and work closely with National Sports Associations to develop their plans for their sports in terms of high performance and the athlete pathway. So it's not just limited to the high performance athletes. We look at where do the athletes come from and how do they feed into a wider high performance sports ecosystem. Our focus is very much upon developing that system and looking at how we can develop a long-term, planned and legacy approach.
Okay. And just as we heard from Boon Yi regarding Team Singapore's performance, what is your personal take on the 600 athlete strong contingent that we sent?
Okay, so it was our largest contingent outside of SEA Games 2015, which is the home games.
Sure.
I thought they performed very well. Overall, I thought the team performed well. The interesting statistic for me is the last 3 SEA Games, we've had over 50 gold medals. We've had over 165 total medals. We'd have to go back to 1993 before we'd get anywhere close to that, and that was a home games.
Correct, yeah.
So I think we've moved the whole system forward significantly, and we've consolidated that. Now we need to use that as a platform to push on a little bit further.
Okay. Team Singapore's participation, of course, was across 48 sports. So let's segregate the various sports into clusters.
Okay.
Starting first with combat sports. I believe we saw athletes compete in up to 10 disciplines, including Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, Silat, Wushu, boxing, Kurash, judo, and a few others. So Boon Yi, looking at combat sports, which one stood out for you in terms of delivering according to our pre-games expectations?
For me, among the combat sports, I would say Jiu-Jitsu. We had 2 gold medals from there. Constance, who was also our Asian Games silver medalist.
Yep.
So she delivered a gold medal, and Noah, who would give us a second gold medal as well. Now, I think the key point here is that the sport is actually coming up. It's getting more popular in Singapore. It is at least featured in the last Asian Games. I hope it will continue to feature in subsequent SEA Games as well as Asian Games at least. And we have 2 very young athletes who I think bodes very well for the future of the sport.
And I believe the coach is Mei Ui, right? Former national swimmer. What can you say about the discipline of Kurash, which made its SEA Games debut? And we saw Singapore's Joel Tseng compete in the under 73 kg category, and he did so with a suspected fracture in his right collarbone. So what does that say about?
Wow, Team Singapore's values: pride, performance, perseverance. Actually, it happens in sports. I remember in the Asian Games, our Wushu athlete had to do the same thing.
Right.
And I think for the athletes, in the athlete's mind, it's about balancing the injury management with what they have to deliver for the country, and our medical team obviously support them. But lots of hearts and minds over there to get it done. Maybe if I add on to my comment about Jiu-Jitsu, is that the 2 athletes are actually were doing other sports in their younger days, right?
Yeah.
And I think that says something about the importance of a multi-sports environment. It says something about in some sports not to specialize too early, and for a small country, small population base like ours, the ability to cross athletes from sport to sport appropriately, I think is something that is critical.
Nice. Richard, let's turn to Pencak Silat. This SEA Games, there was a concern that some of our current world champions, weren't able to travel because the Philippines were not hosting the weight classes. But we still saw our exponents come back with 2 gold, 1 silver, 2 bronze medals. The gold came in the men's standing and the men's semi-regu as well. So would you agree that the younger cohort of Silat exponents rose to the occasion?
Yeah, I think they stood up. I thought they stood up and they were counted. It's interesting when we go back over the last few editions. Traditionally, Silat, we seem to deliver 1 gold medal. We had higher hopes this time around, not least because we had a fabulous World Championships at the end of 2018.
Yeah.
And they delivered 2 gold medals. But that was even more significant in the heavier weight match classes were not part of the SEA Games, which is traditionally where we tend to do better. And so many of the youngsters coming into the lower weight match classes and the artistic classes, they performed. So not only did they exceed their average for the last 3 SEA Games, they overperformed in those terms. And so it's doubly pleasing that they've been able to do that, and they've been able to push on yet again.
Of course, one of those, the 2 gold medalists was 18-year-old Muhammad Hazim, who is currently the world champion. And guess what? He has watched Creed 2, that sequel to Double. He has watched it 6 times. He's inspired by that movie. Yeah, 6 times. The movie was just released a couple of months back.
Yeah.
So congrats, Hazim. Now, in the sport of Wushu, we saw 1 gold, 1 silver. And this haul was lower than the previous last 2 editions of the Games. 2015, we had 12 medals, including 6 gold. And just 2 years ago in Kuala Lumpur, it was 8 medals, inclusive of 2 gold.
Yeah.
But this edition, it was down to 2 medals, I think, overall. So, Richard, is the sport of Wushu in Singapore something to worry about, and what would you attribute the declining trend to?
I don't think we need to worry or don't need to panic just yet. I think it's a wake-up call in many regards. We do need to look at, let's call it sport Wushu, and where it sits within the overall NSA, which has many different functions other than sport Wushu. I think we need to focus a little bit more on the daily training environment. I think we need to look at their national centre and how we operate that so that we can deliver a full-time training load. I think that's the challenge moving ahead.
Okay.
There are changes that are coming afoot. We're going to be working very closely with them. Ironically, we're putting in a former world Silat champion who's going to be working very closely with them.
A former Silat world champion.
Yeah, to work very closely with them in terms of the daily training environment. Shakir's got particular experience.
Shakir Juanda?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we think there's a lot of learning from the Silat experience that's directly replicable with Wushu. Perhaps not on a technical basis, but on a systems basis. We think there's some exciting stuff that they can do, and we're confident that we can turn it around. Interestingly, the gold medal didn't come from where we expected, and so again, it's a different set of athletes who medalled this time around, except for Joan, and we still think there's plenty of scope to develop further in Wushu. So we're not panicking yet. We think that there is room for improvement, and we're prepared to work with them to try and bring about that improvement.
You made that comparison across the three editions.
Right, yes.
Wushu.
Yeah.
But actually the events are rather different. Yeah.
Okay.
Of the, I think there were 16 events this time around.
Okay.
Only 5 were repeated across 2015, 2017, 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, 2019.
Okay.
And actually the two events that we medaled, gold and silver, are Asian Games events. Yeah. So
right.
I think
that's a good way of putting it. You mentioned Shakir. Okay, Shakir Juanda, of course, is a 2-time world Silat champion, and just about 1 month ago he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And to now see Shakir now helping Wushu is going to be a different.
So it's interesting developments because we've got some new staff.
Yeah.
Shakir is one of them. Vanessa Neo is another one who's on our staff.
Yeah.
These are former spec scholars, tremendous athletes in their own right, who are helping SSI to develop the expertise and to give back.
Okay.
And we think that's a very positive improvement to the way in which we're trying to move things forward.
Brilliant. We'll just touch on one more martial arts sport. Boon Yi, Taekwondo. Were you expecting them to bring home 1 silver and 1 bronze, especially with a former Commonwealth and SEA Games gold medalist in the form of Chelsea Ensim as the leader of the squad?
I think the other countries have obviously been improving. We were hoping that Taekwondo would do better than what they did in 2017. I think they only had a bronze at that time. And given the recent troubles in STF over the past 6 months or so, we were I think very pleased that Ming Wei brought back a silver. He lost out to a higher ranked Thai athlete in the final, but he did bring back a silver. So I think it reinforces the point that when the governance aspect is not properly managed, ultimately performance by the athletes would see some issues. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we are on the uptrend, back on track to help them continue to improve.
Okay. Let's move on to racket sports, comprising squash, tennis, badminton, and table tennis. Let's begin with table tennis. Richard, our young squad returned home with seven medals, including 2 gold in the singles matches. I believe the initial prediction was a clean sweep of all 4 gold medals. We are aware that this is the first time it was a young, all Singapore-born team of male athletes in the form of Cohen, Clarence, and Josh. So the question, Richard, is in the past, we relied on our naturalized citizens or foreign talent, that's what we used to call them, to win the gold medals. This time around, after years of youth development, we sent several local born athletes, but they couldn't for this edition, they couldn't get the job done, as in the clean sweep, if that was the target. So, the million-dollar question, do we continue to groom more homegrown talents and sacrifice results, or still feature more naturalized citizens in our Team Singapore contingent?
Okay, I would look at this from a slightly different perspective. We didn't project or simulate that we were going to win all the gold medals. Okay, so we are aware that there's changes, and there have been changes probably since 2016. Actually, under the surface, they've been working very hard at developing young athletes, local athletes to come through. This takes time. We know it takes 8 to 12 years to develop high performance athletes. So it's a long, slow, tedious process sometimes. Actually, they perform really well. Right? So 1 and 2 in the men's singles, 1 and 2 in the women's singles.
Yeah.
And that was against the background of the number 2, Yu Meng Yu, in the women's side, being injured and coming out fairly late.
Yeah.
And Lin Yu stepped in and performed really well. When in fact she won with Fang Ten Wei
also
dropping out injured in the final. But what was particularly exciting was the performance of the young boys. Clarence has been around for a while. Cohen has come through, World Junior number 1.
Yeah, his debut.
Fantastic result. And I thought they battled back, particularly Cohen in the semi-finals. And Lin Yu as well. Their backs were against the wall. They were 3-0 down. They pulled back. They won it 4-3. So I thought they showed some real good fighting spirit. So I would argue that table tennis for us, they performed absolutely on target, rather than an underperformance. I think it was unrealistic to expect that they were going to come in and sweep all the gold medals.
Yeah.
I know it's every 2 years that's the expectation, because they've set themselves such high standards, and good for them. But yes, there's a bit of change, but I thought the players that played performed well. Slightly disappointing in the men's doubles and the women's doubles. I know the players felt slightly disappointed, but they still picked up. I think they picked up a bronze medal in that. But the clean sweep in the men's and the women's singles, fantastic.
I think the pairing of Josh and Cohen, I think that doubles is one to watch out for.
I think there's much to celebrate and much to look forward in the future.
Turning to tennis, no medals to show this time around, as opposed to 1 bronze 2 years ago. So how is the SSI addressing the issue of a sport that has no shortage of playing courts in Singapore? Practically every condominium in the country has a tennis court. We hosted 5 editions of the WTA finals. We just hosted the Davis Cup 6 months ago. So why is the national tennis scene just not seeing the pipeline of quality-based youngsters coming through to compete at the highest levels and achieve the results that we hope they can?
I think we're going to make a difference between facilities. Facilities don't make players. Okay, it's nice to have great facilities, but great players can be made from very poor facilities. What's critical in all of this is coaching, both the number of coaches and the quality of coaches, and that takes time. So just as we develop the athlete pipeline, we have to develop the coaches pipeline. Now there are quite a number of coaches within Singapore. We haven't paid as much attention perhaps to the programs that we run. We are paying more attention to that, but I mentioned earlier, 8 to 12 years to develop high performance athletes. We're working with what we have within the system now. We're working very closely and very hard with STA in order to develop the programs and the young players coming through. We have Voyager, who run the Active SG tennis program. We've got the NSA running their program. That's great that we've got more than one. We're moving away from a single pipeline. These things take time. Disappointed with the outcome. You could argue that in 2017 with Stephanie, we had an exceptional performance against the grain in terms of where we were. We were a little bit disappointed in terms of the women's doubles. We thought that there was a chance of possibly getting a bronze medal there. Didn't come off this time, but it doesn't mean to say that they're off track. I think it's going to take a while to turn things around. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to try and do that, and we work very closely with the NSA to try and do that.
Boon Yi, we come to you, and badminton, we returned with 1 silver, 2 bronze medals. And that lone silver medal came from Loh Kian Yew after his straight sets lost in the men's singles final. So after 37 years, the wait for a men's singles gold is further put on hold. But in the women's singles, we did see Yeo Jia Min forced to retire from her quarterfinal matchup. I was there just about 10 meters away filming, and she retired due to injury in the third set. Just before we get your thoughts, let's hear what Jia Min had to say right after her withdrawal, followed by Kian Yew's loss in the grand final.
I've been actually dealing with a bit of knee problem before, but then then I didn't expect that I would like strain it during the game. Yeah.
I think first set I played quite okay, but I find kind of wasted because I still made some simple error that made him get point easily. So and then make him get more confidence. So yeah, it's quite wasted for the first set.
Second set?
Second set, I was leading 11-6, and then I think I got quite a confidence at the time, and then maybe after 11 point, I kind of want to win too much, so I rushed for the shots, and then make so many mistakes, and the opponent just get back his confidence, and then it's not as easy as it is from there on.
So Boon Yi, one of the points that Jia Min mentioned, that was just prior to the SEA Games, that she was still actively travelling and competing at 2 or 3 international events before arriving in Manila. She feels that might have caused her to get injured. I believe it was a meniscus knee injury in the quarterfinal match. So what is your take on this issue? How can SSI help to prevent similar future situations so as a so-called a burnout before the games?
I think injury management is very much part and parcel of being an elite athlete. And in the year leading up to qualification for the Olympics in Tokyo, we really have to find a way to balance between competing for ranking points for qualification, as well as attending and being present at important major games like the SEA Games. So the way we work with our athletes is to make sure that they're well educated. After all, we can't be by their side day in and day out, every minute of the day. They have to learn how to condition themselves. They have to learn how to prepare themselves. They have to learn how to rest and recover, right? So that they are on time. But at the same time, no human is a machine. So these things are never definitive. Right? You can't say that I do A, B, C, and then the outcome is going to be there.
Yeah.
So sometimes the body will speak for itself.
Yeah.
Right? So when these things happen, our team of medical staff work with our athletes closely to ensure that they are able to be brought back to training and competition in the most optimal time. And our plans are always fluid. We start off the year with a yearly plan, but we adjust along the way as things like this happen. And very much a part of growing up as an athlete is learning to deal with issues like this. And I'm sure Jia Min will come back stronger.
That's right. She's already promised because she's got the Olympic qualifiers coming up, I believe in January. So all the best to her recovery, Jia Min. Over in the sport of squash, it was a haul of 2 silver, 3 bronze medals, as opposed to the 3 gold medals won just 2 years ago. We know 2 of the golds came from jumbo doubles events, which unfortunately the Philippines could not host the events. They scrapped it just 4 weeks before the games. We also know that the Squash Association had some internal issues when the head coach and the technical director tendered their respective resignations 1.5 months before the SEA Games. But having said that, we still saw our former star player and the assistant national coach Vivian Ramanan step up to the plate and led the team to a haul of 2 silver and 3 bronze. Thus, Boon Yi, even though squash didn't win a single gold this time, what can you say about the athletes being able to understand the situation within the NSA, still went all out to compete in Manila?
Yes. It's never going to be easy in squash. Malaysia is a powerhouse. And I think we did exceptionally well last SEA Games in KL. And I was there at the match, the men's team match against Indonesia, and I had the opportunity to really look the players in the eye, and I would say that they maintained their focus. I don't think they let some of the events leading up to the games in the NSA affect them. So all of them played their hearts out, and Coach Vivian, I think, did a fantastic job. The teamwork, the determination, the commitment is really evident. So kudos to the team. I think they did well.
Okay, let's hear now from Coach Vivian at the end of Singapore's squash campaign.
This, as Mantong has said, is a new squad, relatively young squad. They have got a lot of potential in them, and these games have given them a lot of experience, and definitely they will bring this experience back with them and toughen up mentally and prepare for the next games. I have belief in them, and they will be able to deliver in the next SEA Games.
And for a quick word on the women?
Women is the same as well. It's a relatively young team. Everyone here actually have given their best and fought all the way, and I'm very proud of the team, both the men's and the women's team. Samuel is not here, but he also pushed through even though he had gastric. That really shows what this team is all about. They don't give up, so I'm very proud of them.